I am Brad Anderson. I am the chair of the projects committee for the foundation. With all the donations that is provided, we take advantage of that, and we look at soliciting proposals and reviewing them, and then selecting projects for funding. And many of the projects that we've done in the last 10 years have been funded through the donations that you provided, and I'm here today to primarily introduce one of the projects that we have just recently completed called the Rocky Mountain Environmental Challenge. We did this project in collaboration with FEMA Region VIII and EarthForce, and we'll be talking a little bit about that in a minute or two. And we focused this particular project not at the scholarship level, but we took it a little bit deeper, and we started at middle schools, and specifically a middle school within the Rocky Mountain region. And we solicited proposals from them, and at this point, I'm going to be brief. I'm going to introduce Tony, who's going to give you the details. Tony Mendez from FEMA Region VIII. Thanks.
Thank you, Brad, and I really appreciate the chance to share some really creative and innovative thoughts and ideas about what we're trying to do in FEMA Region VIII in Denver. We created a couple of years ago an effort in conjunction with some partner organizations to reach out to young people and to engage those young citizens in terms of thinking about the natural hazards that they live with in their community. One of the things that is always a challenge for adults, for those of us who think we're adults, is not quite really remembering how smart we were as kids and how much smarter today's children are. But engaging young citizens in middle school has been an interesting effort because many of us as adults seem to take things on good faith, and we find ourselves needing to prove exactly what we're talking about to these young citizens and helping them to engage their community leaders to discuss things like what natural hazards are our communities susceptible to and what can we do about it. A couple of years ago, as I said, we went and searched for some partners and found an organization called EarthForce, which is a private nonprofit that's been engaged in youth projects and activities, primarily place and project-based learning throughout the country. And we invited them to come and work with us in Colorado, in the northern Colorado areas, school districts, primarily Fort Collins, Loveland, and Estes Park. And these various school districts at the middle school level, the teachers were engaged in a learning opportunity, teaching them how to teach through this process, getting the kids to understand what their hazards are in their community, identifying some potential projects, and then engaging in that conversation with community leaders at the elected and appointed level. So it has been a rather long process each year for 2 years in a row, but we have validated this through a proof of concept, and we think that it deserves this level of attention.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me out, and thanks for having us out. I often say that I have the best job in the country because part of what I do every spring is I travel around and see young people like Owen make presentations about projects that they've been working on for 7 or 8 or 9 months. And talk about how important and exciting it has been to them. We have developed this process that we call the Earthforce process or the Community Action Problem Solving process. And that process just has young people do the same thing that all of you do all of the time. And that is they identify problems in their community, they identify the causes of those problems, they identify the factors that keep those problems in place, and then they identify ways to solve those problems, and then they enact them. And it's that extra part of enacting them and identifying things that they care about that really makes the difference for young people. Because it's not often, and I've seen this even today, it's not often that young people actually get to say what they care about. It's not often that they get to identify how they're going to work on something. It's not often that they get to come up with solutions. And the interesting part about them coming up with solutions is that though we all start in the same place talking about flooding, they go in a number of different directions to identify solutions. And so in addition to Owen's fantastic project, we had projects this year where, over the last 2 years, where young people are working with the school district to install best management practices as they redesign the school grounds. We have young people that are making emergency packets for kids with special needs because they have different needs during disasters. We have young people who have redesigned the track at their school so that it absorbs flood, or it moves flood water away from the land. And so there are a lot of things that young people can do when they're excited to do that. The way we do it is we train teachers to use a process in a classroom that is problem solving and will look very familiar to you to how you solve problems, but imagine doing that with a group of 11 and 12-year-olds. And so we train teachers on how to do that. So the next thing is, why do we do this? You know, what's important about this? And Tony alluded to this a little bit when we started. When Tony was looking for partners, and they were talking about different ways to do community engagement. We happened to meet them at a meeting that we were at, and we started talking about what does community engagement look like when you start younger, right? When you don't start with people who are in their 50s or 60s or 40s or 20s or 30s, but what happens when you start with teenagers? And there are a couple of things benefits that you get from that. First is that you get a larger community engagement, right? So young people, they not only work on the problem, as you heard from Owen, they also go to fairs and talk about how they're going to solve the problem. They go to other community members. They meet with their school boards, et cetera, et cetera. So you get a wider community engagement. And I can promise you that Owen's father, who is right here, and the amazing Brad, has heard more about FireWise programs over the last 6 months than anybody would ever want to. And so there's a big community engagement. The second thing, and Tony alluded to this as well, is that this is the point at which you can build young people as citizens. So here's a totally crazy thing that you might at first not believe, but I want you to listen to, which is that the point at which you decide whether or not you're going to be engaged in communities around issues that you care about is when you're between the ages of 11 and 14. Right? When you're between 11 and 14, that's when you start to devise your civic muscle. Right? When you build a tool to solve problems. And if we can capture young people at that time, and if we can convince them to use tools like civic engagement to solve problems like flooding, then they're 40% more likely to be engaged as adults. So not only do you get to see Owen make a solution or solve a problem here, the likelihood that Owen will be involved for a long time goes up substantially, as well as other young people. The last thing, and the thing that I don't want to overlook, is that these kids are doing real resilience work, right? They're decreasing the amount of burning that goes in their community, they're redesigning landscapes, they're changing the way their cities are structured. So there's real resilience work that is going on from these young people. Third thing I was going to talk about is what's next. Well, we've been doing this for 2 years, as Tony mentioned. We think it's been a great success. It's been an interesting pilot in a lot of ways. It's the first time we've ever worked in environmental hazards or flood mitigation or anything like that. It's the first time that FEMA has tried to engage young people at this age level. And so there's been a lot for us to learn from each other. But now we feel like the program is getting to the place where we can take it to new audiences. So over the next year, over the next 6 to 7 months, we're going to be identifying 2 new communities to work in. One will be in Region 8, one will be outside of Region 8, and we're going to identify those, we'll work with them and set them up, and they will launch in schools in the fall of 2020. So we're going to start that way. And then after that, we hope to add between 2 and 4 communities a year. So we're going to start to blossom the program out, and hopefully some of you we can work with. In addition to that, I think it's incredibly important. I want to follow up on something that Owen said, which is a big thank you to our partners, right? So FEMA has stuck with us in Region 8, and the great folks they work with at Resilient Action Partners have stuck with us as we've tried to figure this out and had to work through a lot of initial challenges and how do we engage people, and that has been fantastic. And they're sticking with us as we talk about what growth looks like and how do we get bigger. But I also want to thank ASFPM Foundation, which I have almost as hard of a time saying as Owen does. Unfortunately, I think I coached him on saying that, and so that's part of the challenge. But we've worked with the ASFPM Foundation, and it's done a couple of things that are really important for us. First is the foundation has helped us find volunteers in the communities where we work. And those volunteers do two things. So when the young people are identifying the problems that they want to work on, they don't really have the expertise in flood mitigation or floodplain analysis and such. And so they're able to pull in members from ASFPM that can help them understand that. The second thing is that a lot of members of ASFPM and some of the local chapters participate as judges. So it sounds like it's a one-day event, but it takes 6 months for kids to get through this process. And as they get through the process, they develop a proposal, which they send to us, and then we send out to professionals to read. And members have helped us by reading those proposals, providing feedback to the students, and helping us identify the best ones. And then the third thing is, and Owen kind of mentioned this, but I think it bears repeating, which is that every project that gets to the finalists, the top 10 projects of this, they receive funding to implement their program in their community. And that funding comes directly from the donations that are made to the ASFPM Foundation. And but for that funding, without that money, those young people wouldn't be able to do those projects. Right? So the school that is installing BMPs over the last couple of years, that never would have happened. The Firewise education program that's going on in Estes Park never would have happened. The young people that are creating disaster packages for disabled kids never would have happened. And that fundamental work, that partnership between the funding and the volunteering and helping us think about what it takes to grow is essential for something like this becoming something much larger. So I want to thank all of you that have donated in any way to the program. I want to thank the board and the trustees of the foundation, and I want to thank especially Owen and all the young people who have served as such an inspiration to me, and hopefully will keep leading us as we go into the future.